Lafayette, Louisiana. April 2019. A city where Southern charm masked deep-seated secrets. Azaleas were blooming. Prom dresses were being altered. Graduation was just around the corner. But behind the green lawns of a modest neighborhood, something sinister was unfolding. A beloved high school senior was about to die, and the truth behind her murder would soon shake the entire community to its core. Belle Leblanc was an 18-year-old high school senior living in Lafayette, Louisiana, in the spring of 2019. She was the only child of Frank and Brenda Leblanc, a truck driver and a home health caregiver, both of whom were often away for long stretches of time. Her father was rarely home at all, having grown up largely on her own, but was already used to being alone and hadn't needed much time to adjust after her parents' divorce following nearly 2 decades of marriage. She now lived with her mother in a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. Belle attended Lafayette High School and was known around town as the girl who had both beauty and brains. She was head cheerleader and a consistent honor roll student. With her strong grades, she hoped to earn a scholarship to Louisiana State University, where she planned to major in communications. Her dream was to become a television anchor, someone like Norah O'Donnell on CBS Evening News. At school, Belle was a favorite among both teachers and classmates. Her long blonde hair flowed past her shoulders, and she was rarely seen without the radiant smile that lit up her pretty face. She loved organizing school spirit events and cheering at football games. She also occasionally volunteered at local charity events. Belle was especially excited about prom, which was just days away. Her gown, a pale pink dress, hung on the closet door in her room. Her Instagram feed in early April was filled with prom-related posts, and her Pinterest boards overflowed with hair and makeup inspiration. But Belle had a secret that almost no one knew. Months earlier, she had begun a clandestine relationship with a much older man, 60-year-old Richard Dick DeVille, a married real estate developer with deep ties to the Lafayette business community. They had first met at a charity event hosted at the Lafayette Science Museum, where Belle had been volunteering with her school's honor society. Richard, a sponsor of the event, took an immediate interest in her. What began as casual small talk turned into private text messages. Eventually, their relationship became sexual, despite the vast age gap. Belle is a natural blonde with strikingly beautiful face and an enviable figure, ample curves and long legs that made men stare. From the moment he saw her, Richard knew he wanted Belle. He became obsessed, determined to have her entirely, body and soul. For Belle, though, it was different. She believed Richard would leave his wife for her. In her mind, she began to imagine a new kind of future, one filled with money, travel, and luxury. She was still a teenager, and in many ways, she still believed in fairy tales. It was Wednesday morning, April 17th, 2019, just after 7 a.m., when Brenda LeBlanc returned home from her overnight shift as a home health caregiver. As she opened the door to the kitchen, a sinking feeling settled in her chest. Something felt wrong. She hurried down the hall and pushed open her daughter's bedroom door and froze. Belle LeBlanc, just 18 years old, was lying motionless on her bed. Strangely, she was completely naked. Brenda dropped her bag and rushed to her daughter's side. Belle's eyes were closed. Her skin was pale. She wasn't breathing. Brenda called 911 at exactly 7:13 a.m. Immediately after, she began administering CPR. Never had she imagined that the skills she had once learned for work would be used on her own child. Emergency crews arrived within minutes, and soon the quiet neighborhood street was lit up with flashing red and blue lights. Paramedics entered the bedroom, but it was too late. Belle was declared dead at the scene. On the table was a half-empty bottle of over-the-counter sleeping pills. Her diary lay next to it. But something strange caught Brenda's attention. Several pages of the diary had been torn out. Jagged edges stuck out from the spiral binding, and tiny scraps of paper were scattered across the floor. At first glance, it looked like a suicide. The sleeping pills and the missing diary pages all seemed to support that theory. But Brenda told police something didn't feel right. Belle had been in good spirits just days earlier. Over the weekend, she had tried on her prom dress while Brenda was home. She had seemed genuinely excited. The dress, a pale pink gown, hung on a closet door. Her new sandals sat on top of the shoebox nearby. Her evening bag was on the table. Her makeup bag was unzipped, and her phone was charging beside the bed. Just the night before, she had posted a playful Instagram story, a boomerang video of herself holding the dress in front of the mirror. As investigators began to look more closely, more details started to surface, details that didn't quite fit with the theory of suicide. When police arrived at the Leblanc home on the morning of April 17th, 2019, they quickly secured the scene. Lafayette PD Detective Julie Cormier and her partner, Detective Ed Hebert, were the first investigators on site. The Leblanc home was soon surrounded by yellow tape and police cars. Detective Cormier had a reputation for staying calm under pressure and was known around the department for catching details others missed. She immediately began walking through Belle's room, taking note of everything. The position of the body, the fact that it was naked, the bottle of sleeping pills, the open diary, the prom dress hanging from the closet door. But what stood out most were the things that weren't there. There were no signs that Belle had actually taken the pills. Typically, when someone overdoses, the body reacts. But there was no vomit on the sheets or floor. No pill residue around her mouth. Her tongue was clear. There were no visible indicators that she had ingested a lethal dose of anything. That raised red flags immediately. Though the scene appeared peaceful at first glance, it began to feel staged. Cormier noticed something else, faint bruises on Belle's neck, just below the jawline. They weren't dark, but they were there. Her skin also showed subtle red marks, not easily visible unless you were looking closely. When detectives gently turned her arms, they found small scratches on her wrists and forearms, signs that she had fought back. Later that day, the coroner issued a preliminary report confirming what Cormier had suspected. Belle hadn't overdosed. She had been manually strangled, killed by someone's bare hands. There were clear signs of pressure to her throat and broken blood vessels in her eyes. The scratches on her arms were described as defensive wounds, suggesting she had tried to push her attacker away. This wasn't suicide. This was murder, carefully staged to look like something else. Police sealed off the bedroom and began searching for clues. They lifted fingerprints from the table, the door handle, and the diary. Belle's phone, fully charged and untouched since late the previous night, was taken in as evidence. Investigators would later pull data from her Snapchat and Instagram to see who she'd last communicated with. By the end of the day, they had a growing list of questions and very few answers. Richard DeVille was 60 years old and one of the wealthiest men in Lafayette, Louisiana. By April 2019, he owned several high-end commercial properties, including a stake in River Ranch Town Square. He was known around town as a successful businessman who donated to local charities, attended ribbon cuttings, and often appeared in the Acadiana Advocate. He hosted lavish fundraisers at venues like City Club at River Ranch and was frequently seen at black tie galas alongside his young wife, Monique. But when investigators reviewed Belle Leblanc's phone, they discovered something disturbing. There were hundreds of text messages, many of them sexual in nature, along with records of late-night conversations and explicit photos linking Richard DeVille to Belle. The two had been involved in a secret relationship for months. They first met at a charity event hosted at the Lafayette Science Museum, where Belle had volunteered as part of her school's honor society. Richard, a sponsor of the event, had taken an immediate interest in her. Their relationship soon turned sexual, despite the stark age difference. When detectives first brought Richard in for questioning, he denied even knowing Belle. But that story quickly unraveled when investigators showed him text messages detailing their sexual encounters, along with nude photos of Belle, posing for Richard, recovered from her iPhone. Confronted with the evidence, Richard admitted to the affair but claimed it was based on love. And besides, Belle was 18 when we met. We didn't have sex until I made sure she was the legal age of consent, he said. Richard described Belle as mature for her age and claimed they had discussed building a life together after her graduation. According to him, he had planned to leave his wife after prom so he and Belle could be together openly. But his version of events raised more questions than it answered. Richard had no alibi for the night of April 16th, 2019. He claimed he was at home watching reruns of Blue Bloods on CBS, but his wife had been out of town visiting her sister in Austin. He hadn't placed any calls, sent any texts, or been seen by neighbors. Security footage from his gated community in River Ranch, just south of the Vermilion River, showed his car leaving at 11:45 p.m., but there was no footage of him returning until much later in the early morning. He had been gone for a long time. Detectives noted Richard's calm, calculated manner. He was polite, but his answers felt rehearsed. Though he said he cared deeply for Belle, investigators began to wonder just how far he would go to keep their relationship a secret, especially with prom and graduation just days away. He had motive, he had opportunity, and he had every reason to lie. Monique DeVille, 29, was the much younger wife of Richard DeVille. After graduating from high school, she briefly worked as an intern at one of Richard's businesses. Just after turning 19, she left the job to become his wife, devoting herself fully to Richard and his many whims, particularly when it came to the bedroom. Monique was an exceptionally beautiful woman, with a figure that turned heads. Other women envied her looks. Men couldn't hide their lust. And Monique knew how to use her body to keep Richard satisfied. But behind closed doors, their marriage was far from perfect. Friends later told investigators that Monique had recently discovered Richard was having an affair with 18-year-old Belle Leblanc. One friend claimed Monique found explicit messages on Richard's phone during a vacation to Lafayette, a nudist island off the French Riviera, where Richard got a thrill from showing off his naked wife to other men, enjoying the way they stared at her with desire. In the days that followed, Monique reportedly became withdrawn and angry. She stopped posting on social media and skipped a fashion brunch she had been scheduled to host. Those close to her said she felt embarrassed, betrayed, and deeply hurt, not just as a wife, but as a woman replaced by a teenager. Unbeknownst to Monique, some of her so-called friends were gossiping behind her back, pointing out that she herself had been 18 when she first started sleeping with Richard, who at the time was still married to his previous wife, also in her late 20s. Detectives brought Monique in for questioning 3 days after Belle's death. She arrived wearing dark sunglasses and carrying a Chanel handbag. During the interview, she was composed and in control, though detectives noted her clipped tone and flashes of anger. Monique admitted she had known about the affair and said she had confronted Richard. She described the relationship as inappropriate and shameful, but denied ever contacting Belle directly. Monique claimed she had been at her sister's home in Austin the night of April 16th. Her sister corroborated the story, and cell phone records showed Monique's phone pinging off towers near the area. Still, investigators were uneasy. They sensed she was hiding something, if not direct involvement, then knowledge of something deeper. She didn't show emotion when Belle's name came up. Instead, she seemed more concerned about her husband's public image than the teenage girl who had died. Without any physical evidence linking her to the crime, detectives had no choice but to let her go. But privately, they wondered, was Monique simply a heartbroken wife, or was she something more dangerous? On April 23, 2019, just after 2:45 p.m., dark clouds rolled across Lafayette as Detective Julie Cormier opened the final autopsy report from the coroner's office. The news changed everything. Belle Leblanc had been 8 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. At first, investigators assumed the father was Richard DeVille, the 60-year-old real estate developer who had been in a secret relationship with Belle. But DNA testing from the fetal tissue showed a different truth. The baby's father was not Richard. It was Zach Menard, Belle's ex-boyfriend and a football player at Lafayette High School. This new detail was a major shift in the investigation. Belle and Zach had dated for nearly 2 years before their messy breakup in January 2019. Friends said Belle was heartbroken at the time, but had stayed in contact with Zach. The two had been spotted together at the Acadiana Mall food court in early April, drinking iced coffee and talking quietly. At the time, it didn't seem unusual, but now it raised red flags. Belle's diary, usually full of personal thoughts and details, was found on her nightstand, but several pages had been torn out. Detectives suspected those pages might have included entries about the pregnancy and Belle's plans for the future. It appeared Belle was preparing to end her affair with Richard and possibly reunite with Zach. She had been looking forward to prom and talking to friends about a fresh start. The detectives believed she planned to reveal the pregnancy that weekend. The idea that Belle was leaving Richard and carrying another man's child opened up new motives. Someone didn't want that secret to come out. Whether it was jealousy, revenge, or fear of scandal, police now saw the murder as more complex than originally believed. Detectives returned to both Richard and Monique DeVille for follow-up interviews. They also brought in Zach Menard for questioning and collected more electronic data, including deleted texts and hidden photo files from Belle's phone. Investigators began building a new timeline of her final days, piecing together details from friends, teachers, and even Snapchat records. The twist in the case added fresh urgency. What started as a possible suicide had become a tangled web of love, secrets, and betrayal. Now, the hunt was on for who knew about the baby and who was willing to kill to keep it quiet. Zach Menard was 18 years old. He played running back for Lafayette High School's football team, the Mighty Lions, and was well-liked by classmates and coaches. He and Belle Leblanc had been high school sweethearts, dating for nearly 2 years. Many believed they would attend LSU together. But in January 2019, Belle abruptly ended the relationship, leaving Zach heartbroken. Friends remembered seeing him crying in the student parking lot after the breakup. He started missing classes and skipped several team workouts. Around the same time, Belle began volunteering at upscale charity events and spending time with an older crowd, including people like Richard DeVille. When word spread about Belle's secret relationship with a wealthy real estate developer, classmates said Zach was furious. Some even recalled heated exchanges between him and Belle at school. When detectives later discovered that Zach was the father of Belle's unborn child, he became a person of interest. On April 24, 2019, detectives brought him in for questioning. Zach appeared nervous and upset, but answered their questions without a lawyer. They informed him that the autopsy report revealed Belle had been 8 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. More importantly, DNA testing from the fetal tissue confirmed that Zach was the father. Zach told detectives he had no idea Belle was pregnant. He admitted that, although they had broken up, they never truly stopped seeing each other or having sex. He said he still loved her and had always hoped they'd get back together. Zach also revealed that he drove to Belle's house on the night of April 16th. He said he parked down the street to think. According to him, he sat in his car for a few minutes, but never went inside. Investigators verified his story. A neighbor's Ring camera showed Zach's car pulling up at 8:12 p.m. and leaving just 10 minutes later. No one was seen getting out. Police also pulled Zach's cell tower records, which confirmed his location matched his account. Although Zach had a possible motive, hurt feelings, jealousy, and now the shock of a hidden pregnancy, he had a solid alibi and showed no signs of physical struggle. His name remained in the case file, but detectives began shifting their focus back to the DeVilles. Belle's murder was no longer just about love. It was about power, reputation, and secrets someone wanted buried forever. On the morning of April 25th, 2019, at 9:12 a.m., police arrived at a large, gated home in River Ranch, an upscale neighborhood in Lafayette, Louisiana. The major break in the case had come just hours earlier, when detectives received new information added to the final autopsy report. Belle Leblanc was found to have had sexual intercourse shortly before her death, and the DNA recovered from her matched Richard DeVille. With this new evidence, detectives returned to the DeVille residence to interrogate Richard for a second time. They also planned to confront him about something else. Belle had been pregnant with Zach Menard's baby. The investigators wanted to gauge Richard's reaction, not only to that news, but also to the fact that he was now confirmed to have been the last person with her before she died. That same morning, detectives also conducted a second search of the DeVille home, this time looking specifically for items that might contain DNA or documentary evidence. Inside an otherwise empty trash can, investigators found several torn pieces of lined notebook paper. Though partially ripped, they managed to reconstruct multiple pages using tape. The handwriting matched entries from Belle's diary, which had been found at her room on the morning of her death, but with the final pages missing. Most crucially, partial fingerprints were discovered on one of the torn pages. Lab tests would later confirm that the prints belonged to Richard DeVille. According to detectives, Richard knew Belle's mother would be out of the house on the night of April 16th. He pressured Belle into letting him inside. Once there, he seduced her with the promise of a new Maserati, ultimately convincing her to have sex with him. At some point that night, Richard likely discovered her diary and read it without Belle's knowledge. What he found inside devastated him. Belle had written about continuing to sleep with Zach, the boy she truly loved, and how she only endured sex with Richard for the money. She described her revulsion in detail, how he smelled like an old man, how she had to pretend to enjoy it, how he needed supplements to perform. She mocked his age and stamina, and, most painfully, she made it clear that she found being with him physically repulsive. Fueled by jealousy and rage, Richard confronted Belle in her bedroom. A loud argument erupted, escalating into a moment of violent fury. He attacked and strangled her with his bare hands. There were clear signs of a struggle, defensive wounds on her arms and faint bruising around her neck. After killing her, Richard staged the scene to look like a suicide. As a final act of humiliation, he left Belle's body naked, posed it on her bed, placed a bottle of sleeping pills nearby, and opened her diary to an earlier, more innocuous entry. That morning, 60-year-old Richard DeVille, one of Lafayette's wealthiest and most prominent citizens, was arrested for the murder of 18-year-old Belle Leblanc. He was taken into custody without incident. At the time of his arrest, Richard remained calm and said very little. He was booked into the Lafayette Parish Correctional Center and held without bond. News of the arrest spread quickly. Belle's family released a public statement thanking police for their relentless work. That evening, the community gathered in sorrow for a candlelight vigil outside Lafayette High School, mourning the loss of a young life and the dark secrets that led to her death. In early February 2020, nearly a year after Belle LeBlanc's tragic death, the murder trial of Richard DeVille began at the Lafayette Parish Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with local reporters and students from Belle's school. The case had become one of the most talked about in Louisiana. The prosecution was led by Yvonne Prejean, a 51-year-old district attorney known for her tough approach and commanding courtroom presence. She laid out a detailed timeline of events. Key evidence included the reconstructed diary pages bearing Richard's fingerprints. Several witnesses testified for the prosecution, including Belle's classmates and forensic experts. The jury was shown photos of Belle's bedroom, the staged crime scene, and even her pink prom dress, which had been hanging on the back of her closet door. On the defense side, attorney Alex Guidry, 45, portrayed Richard as a man pushed beyond his breaking point. Guidry argued the killing wasn't premeditated and that Richard hadn't intended to harm Belle. Richard sat quietly for most of the trial, showing little emotion, even when photos of Belle were displayed. At one point, a video of Belle dancing with her classmates, taken just weeks before her death, was played for the jury. Many in the room, including teachers and fellow students, wept. Belle's parents sat in the front row every day. Her mother wept softly throughout most of the testimony. After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Because of the nature of the crime and the age of the victim, Richard DeVille was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some measure of closure, but the pain remained. Hey, interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like our content and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe. In the months following Richard DeVille's conviction, life slowly began to move forward for those left behind. But the impact of Belle LeBlanc's death continued to ripple through Lafayette. Monique DeVille was never charged with a crime, but Richard's guilty verdict affected her deeply. She became an outcast. People she and Richard once socialized with refused to associate with her and began treating her like a pariah. By March 2020, she had moved out of the country, and her whereabouts remained unknown. Zach Menard, Belle's ex-boyfriend and the father of her unborn child, faced a difficult year. Eventually, he earned his high school diploma through online classes. In the fall of 2020, he enrolled at South Louisiana Community College to study criminal justice. Zach also began attending regular therapy sessions at a local counseling center. Every April, near prom season, he visits Belle's grave at Greenlawn Memorial Gardens and leaves a single white rose. Detective Julie Cormier, the lead investigator on the case, was promoted to lieutenant after the trial. Her work on Belle's case was widely praised in local media, and she received an award from the Louisiana Association of Chiefs of Police. Today, she helps train new detectives across the state, focusing on domestic violence cases and crimes involving teenage victims. Her efforts have helped reshape how small police departments in Louisiana approach sensitive investigations. Belle's parents, Frank and Brenda LeBlanc, have worked to keep their daughter's memory alive. They partnered with Louisiana State University to establish the Belle LeBlanc Memorial Scholarship, awarded each spring to a female student from Lafayette Parish pursuing a degree in communications. Belle had once dreamed of becoming a television anchor. The scholarship ensures that her voice and her dreams live on. Belle LeBlanc had her whole life ahead of her, until jealousy and rage stole it away. Her death pulled back the curtain on a world of secrets and control, exposing the hidden rot beneath a polished surface. Thank you for watching True Crime, The Untold Stories. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and always seek the truth.